You're going to start off with a punty and a color rod. You're going to get the tips nice and hot and connect them using a cold tack or a fusion. If you've got a small chunk of color, you can connect it to a punty and make it longer like the color rod that I have here. You're going to start off by heating up a 1/2 inch section of glass, pull it out of the flame, give it a nice pull, spinning both rods, making sure it's nice and straight. The speed of which you pull your stringer will dictate how skinny your stringer is, and the amount of glass you get hot will dictate how long your stringer can be. So if you want a long stringer like I just got, but you want it to be nice and thick as well, you're going to have to pull slower and heat up more glass. So you take these thin stringers that I have here, and you're going to bundle them and break them like spaghetti, just like I just did. Some use a mechanical pencil to help them hold their stringers, but you can definitely manage without. I'm now going to make a can out of this 26mm by 4mm tube that's closed on one end. You can reference back to some of my other videos for other ways to make cans, but for this, the end is pretty thin. I'm going to give it a poke, and it's going to pop open. Now that that's open, I'm going to take this reamer here, I'm going to take this blow tube, and I'm going to ream it open. I'm just going to use this L marver that I have. I'm going to use the corner here and ream it open. It's going to be a little sloppy, but it's going to work. So now we're going to heat both the edges of the tube and the blow tube. We're going to get both of them really hot, just the edge. Notice how I'm bowing forward a little bit. You don't want to be back like this. You don't want to be angled back because you're not going to get the edge hot. You want to bow forward a little bit. Not so much like this where you shoot inside the tube, but just ever so slightly so you can get just the edge nice and hot. Now you're going to connect them in the flame once the edges are nice and hot. Take it out of the flame. You're going to give it a little spin. Let that guy cool down. You don't want to pull and you don't want to push. You just want to have them occupy the same space. Now we're going to cut this tube. Flashed it in the flame a little bit. I'm just going to give it a little cut. Leaving it in the flame spinning. Pull off that end. Now will leave me a can to use to make into a disc flip. I'll rip off the end here, take away a little bit of extra glass. You don't want a big nub there. Now we're going to heat up an inch, maybe 2 inches of glass here. Use my major flame. Once we got that all hot, we'll take it out of the flame, give it a little puff, and round it out. Using the paddle to paddle it slightly angled, spinning and puffing will create a little doorknob shape. Essentially what you've done is create slightly larger tubing, like 38mm tubing, and flatten the face. You could use larger tubing. I like to do it this way because I make my filicellos out of 26mm and I have a lot of it lying around, and I also like how it feels weight-wise. So now we're going to start drawing. So I take my stringer here, and I just heated up the very tip of the stringer by ricocheting the flame off of the section I'm drawing on. And now I'm spinning my left hand away from myself while pushing into the section with my stringer. And it looks like my stringer broke. And that's a worst case scenario, who cares? Let's grab another stringer and we'll just reattach right where we left off and continue with our line. Now you want to use a tungsten or a knife, and you can manipulate your line ever so slightly to fix any imperfection or mistake. If a line isn't completely straight or where lines connect, you want to make them look nice. Now we'll use another stringer. We're going to draw a separate line right next to the other line that we just drew. Again, finding the sweet spot in the flame, shooting the flame almost at our piece rather than the stringer, and having the ricochet flame heat up our stringer, just the tip. Spinning away from herself, finding the perfect amount of pressure to allow ourselves to move in the flame and retain control. And again, use the tungsten or a knife to fix your lines or any imperfection and make sure it's just right. You want to make sure that you warm up your whole section every couple of lines, otherwise it can crack. Now I'm going to draw some reference dots. I'll do one right on the bottom, and do a little polka dot, do one on the right side, and do one on the left. And you can do this with a tungsten pick, or you can even do it with a tie pen if you allow the whole thing to cool down. But I'm drawing a hamsa hand, and these are references to the fingers and the bottom of the hand. So I draw a little squiggle from one of the fingers to the bottom of the hand. I draw another squiggle mirroring the other squiggle to the bottom of the hand. And that will give me the bottom of the palm and my two thumbs, and the beginning of the two thumbs of my hamsa. I use my tungsten to make sure everything is in place where I want it. And now I'm going to do the rest of the thumb. So I draw a little loop there for the rest of the thumb. And now I'm going to do another reference dot because I want to make sure that the width of the thumb on the other side is the same as the other. And now I'm going to connect the tip of the thumb with that reference dot with a little loop, same way I did the other side. And it's pretty good, but it's a hair off, so I'm going to smack it off with the tungsten. It's not totally melted down, so if I give it a little whack, it should just come right off. Some of them are easier than others, and they come right off. Some of them are a little bit more melted down. With this one, I've struggled with it a little bit. So as you can see here, I'm actually going to go into it again. I'm going to smack off one last little bit here. And there we go, it came off. So now I'm going to go replace that line. There's only a little hair off, so I'm just going to replace the line where I wanted it. There we go. Use my tungsten to make sure everything is stuck down exactly where I want it and how I want it. You can use a knife or a tungsten. There we go. Now we're going to do the other lines for the longer fingers. Do a straight line for this one on one side, coming from the top down to where the thumb ends. Do another line on the other side, mirroring, same length. And now we're going to do two more lines in between those lines, making a middle finger. And they're going to be a little bit longer, but end a little bit before where the thumbs end. So you'll see here, make sure you warm up your section, but you'll see here that we've got three fingers in the middle, but they don't have fingertips, so we got to give them fingertips. So we're going to connect the lines with little half circles, giving them little fingertips. Go, and we'll do another one, a little half circle connecting the middle finger to the other finger, giving it a little fingertip. And we'll do it again with the third finger. Connect the line with a little half circle. Then use your tungsten to make sure it's totally round. Round it off. Make your little fingertip. From there, you're going to have a full hamsa hand. So now we're going to make reference dots on either side of the hamsa, on left and right of the hamsa, and this is for the eyeball in the middle of the palm. And with a little crescent shape, we're going to connect those two reference dots. Use a tungsten to make sure it's all melted down and connected where you want it to be connected. And then we'll connect those two reference dots again with a mirroring crescent line. And that will give us a little eyeball. And now we're going to do another line right next to the line we just drew, making an eyelid. And again, and we'll have 2 eyelids to the eye we just drew. Started off with 2 reference dots underneath the thumbs. And made these little crescent-shaped lines, and we've landed ourselves with a hamsa hand and an eyeball. So now I warm up the section every couple of lines, making sure the whole section's nice and warm. And now we're going to speed it up a little bit. We're just going to draw a little border around the entire hamsa. Everything we just drew, we're just going to draw a line right around that whole thing. Later on, we're going to split it up and make that a nice rainbow border around the whole thing. And now I'm going to split the eyelid into 6 sections because the eyelid is going to be rainbow as well. And I always do a 6-colored rainbow, more of a pride rainbow than a Roy G. Biv rainbow, but red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. So I split the eyelid into 6, and now we're going to split the border around the hamsa. I'll do a couple lines. It looks like I made a mistake, so I'm going to pop this mistake off with my tungsten and then replace it with new, better lines. Go, and I'm still just filling in this border with little lines, splitting it so I can fill it in with rainbow colors. And I made a mistake, so I chipped it off with the tungsten and then replaced it before it was melted down. Just doing my best to use symmetry to split the border up. Warm up my whole section. And now I've got the border all split up into rainbow. And now I'm going to split the border of the entire pendant, not the border around my hamsa, but the border around the entire pendant. Now I've got to split that into thirds. So I'm trying to measure that out, using a couple little reference dots like I've been. But then I have it split into thirds. And then once I have it split into thirds, I split it into 6. And then I split it into 12. So I split my borders, giving it some black lines, split them up, and could fill them in rainbow. And I've got my whole hamsa all drawn. So now we're going to go in, we're going to color it with these stringers here. They're much thicker, like I mentioned earlier. You would want to pull these stringers, get more glass hot, and pull it slowly and get nice thick stringers. I'm going to use these stringers, and I'm going to fill in the gaps that I left in my pattern. So it's just like drawing a coloring book and then filling it in. So I use my red, and I fill in this little gap here. Once I fill in that gap, and you'll see since I have 12, I know I can go red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and then that one's red. So I'm going to fill that one in with red. And if the stringer isn't big enough, you just got to fill it in with a second stroke. So now I've got orange, and I don't have to count anymore. I just red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. I fill in those gaps, fill in my pattern. I drew my coloring book, and now I'm going to fill her in. I fill in that purple, and then I'll use a tungsten to clean her up. Make sure that you filled in that pattern just right. Colors filled in the sections that they need to. Just like you straightened out lines, you can straighten out color using your tungsten. And now I'm going to fill in the eyelid. So I start out with the red, one side, then the bottom, I fill in the other side with the red, using my tungsten to make sure everything is in the right place. Just fill in all the rest of the eyelid. It's all rainbow, so I go through it. Red, orange, yellow, green, purple. Now I've got the border and the eyelid filled in, and now we're going to fill in the border around the hamsa hand. So the bottom was orange, and then it splits, so both sides, or the bottom was red, and it splits, and both sides go orange. And then I go yellow, so it goes red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, all the way up on the edges of the hamsa. Fill in around the hamsa hand. And this is just like when we draw with the black lines. You want to get just the tip of the stringer hot, but really make sure that you don't get the surface that you're drawing on too hot. The surface of your glass can't get too hot when you're drawing. Otherwise that will move around and you don't want that. So now we got to fill in the hand, the gap in the hand. So I'm actually going to draw, this is the first time we're going to fill in the glass without filling in all the way to black lines. So we're not just going to fill in black lines. We're actually going to do one strip of yellow down on the right side of our eyeball, or the bottom side of our eyeball, and then I go to orange, and then I go to red. And that's going to fill in the hamsa hand with a rainbow. Then above the eye, we're going to fill in with green, and I just do a nice stripe. And we're the same way that we drew the eyelids, we're just basically going to make colorful eyelids covering the entire hamsa, filling it in, or at least the color lines will mimic the shape the eyelids took. So we're just following the line of the eyelid, going red, orange, yellow, green, purple, green, blue, purple. So we fill those guys in. Filling in the hamsa line by line. You're starting to see it all take shape and be colorful. You want to make sure that it stays nice and hot. Notice it looks much different when I warm it in comparison to when it was cold. And now we're going to fill in all the negative space. We filled in the entire hamsa, so now we're going to fill in all the negative space there. The negative space is going to be white. So we're going to take this white, and we're going to fill around the border of the drawing that we just drew. So everything we just drew, we're going to border it with this white. The reason for that is because when we fill in all this negative space, things might get hot, and you don't want to draw right into your pattern that you just drew. You don't want to draw right into your picture because you could manipulate it. So this border there, that will help us not manipulate the pattern that we've already drawn, the image that we've already drawn. It's going to help us not manipulate anything too much. So I cover around the border of the whole piece, and then I cover around the border of the whole hamsa image, the hand, and then I'm going to fill in all the negative space in between all of that with white. Just fill her in. Alright, and then now you filled in your whole pattern, everything. You can use your paddle, and you're going to just flatten down any bumps you've got on there. And now we're going to attach an opal into the center of our eyeball, making a pupil. So what I did is what I'm doing here is I'm going to heat up where I want to attach the opal, and then heat up the opal, putting it into the flame, and then squish the opal right where I want it, come out of the flame, make sure it's positioned exactly the way I want it, and then we're going to heat up right where the punty is attached to the opal and pull away that punty, leaving the opal behind. There we go, and we left the opal behind. You're going to heat that opal up to make sure that it fuses to the piece, and you can give it a little squish with the paddle. We're going to heat that opal up. You know what, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to use my hand torch actually. And you don't have to do this, but this could be a nice little trick to help with air bubbles. You can heat up the opal. Just make sure that that opal, the edges where that opal was attached, really melt in before you do the next step. But you don't have to do that, and you can also just use your regular torch. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in the spaces on the left and the right of the opal in the eyeball with clear glass. You can't leave just negative space there, otherwise the color's just going to kind of condense around it. And you want to fill it in with a little bit of clear there before you melt everything down. Use my tungsten to make sure everything's kind of squished into place there. Now connect up a punty. Not super straight, but that's okay. We'll make it work. And then we're going to heat up a big section underneath the color that we just drew. The pattern we just drew, we're going to heat up a bunch of glass underneath it, about 2 inches. Take it out of the flame, give it a puff. We're going to blow up a ball a little bit bigger than the section of color that we just drew, the pattern we just drew. And then we'll break off our cold tack. We're going to warm up all the color a little bit, giving it a couple little puffs. You'll notice that it's going to look more and more like a doorknob, more and more like a UFO shape. And then we're going to really focus the heat right on the color, just the color, the pattern that we have there. And we'll heat, heat, heat until it flattens out. Just like so. Nice and flat. You can take a paddle, make sure that it's nice and flat. And there's your section. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you need any more information on how to back or bail a pendant, you can check out my other video, How to Make a Filicello Pendant, Part 3. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel.